How many people like superheroes? I don't know, we may not have many people who would admit it, but America is in love with superheroes. It's part of the American culture. You have Captain America, you have the Incredible Hulk, you have Superman, Spider-Man, Batman. Am I missing anything? But just recently, was it last year, there was a film that came out called Wonder Woman. It may have been, I think it was last year. And I remember a few articles before it actually came out about, was America ready for a woman superhero to be a star on the big screen? Because all of these superheroes were men. And there was a lot of question, there was a lot of debate, because this was a big deal. This is the first time we have a woman superhero movie. And I don't know if anyone here has watched it. I have not yet. But I got a couple statistics on Wonder Woman here that I'll pull up from Forbes magazine. And it says here, the title, Wonder Woman is officially the highest grossing superhero origin film. And it pulled in $821 million, topping 2002's Spider-Man, which was a big deal. Now, this is a big thing because you have women's rights and all this stuff that's come together. And now in America, we have a superhero who's a woman, and that's big in our culture. And it was even bigger back in the time of Israel. Today we'll be talking about a superhero. Her name is Deborah. And I encourage us all to open up to Judges 4. We're going to be looking a little bit at Judges 4 and 5. And as that one article talked about, the superhero Wonder Woman, this Amazonian warrior and fighter, and was America ready to consume this and spend money on this and watch this? It was a lot more radical back in the time of the Judges to have a woman in control, a woman in power. And if you look here on the screen, back in 1125 BC, that's around the time, the period of Deborah. And it was a radical time. This is radical text. We all know how the Bible speaks. We all know how the patriarchal society was set up around a paternal system, a male system. So to have something like this in the Bible is very rare. So I think, we're so close to Mother's Day, we're just the week after, that I think we should spend a little bit more time on a woman superhero in the Bible. So just to introduce this, Judges 5:8 says, what? War came to the city gates, and not a shield or spear was seen among 40,000 in Israel. And we just had a lesson. We just had a lesson on Joshua. What happened in Joshua? Complete annihilation of all the Canaanites. All it is, from chapter to chapter to chapter, is Canaanites being annihilated. What has happened? Just the next chapter, just the next book. What has happened to the people of Israel? I'll just read a little bit more in depth from Judges 5, 6 through 8. It says, in the days of Shagmar, the son of Anath, in the days of Jael, the highways were abandoned, the travelers kept to the byways, the villagers ceased in Israel. They ceased to be until I arose, I, Deborah, arose as a mother in Israel. But when new gods were chosen, then war was in the gates. Was a shield or spear to be seen among 40,000 in Israel? And this is a sad time. This is a very sad time for Israel because they're fragmented, they're broken up, and Judges is full of Israel, the 12 tribes being scattered, independent, ununified, and worshiping other gods. So if you look at the book of Judges, it's very, very interesting. You look in there, and it starts with the good judges. Deborah was the third judge. The first 4 judges tend to be the best. Once you get to Gideon, it's all downhill from there. Because you have Abimelech, then you have Jephthah, and then at the very end you have Samson, who is the worst of all judges, impulsive, not really following the will of God, and somehow God still works through him. But if you look in the third judge here, Deborah, it is an amazing story. In this story of a woman superhero, you have gender reversal. So the main character is a woman, not a man. The heroes are the women, multiple women in the Bible, in this story. It's full of impossibilities. You have men who are supposed to be warriors in Israel asked to fight, but they're unwilling to fight. You have a weak military leader up against a powerful military leader. And then you have a woman leading that force, the weak force, against one of the best militaries in the Canaan region at that time. And then, of course, you have victory against that force. And then finally, in the end, you have the greatest military mind of that time, around 1100 BC. He is killed by a woman who is not a warrior at all. So this is indeed a radical story for that time and in that society. Open with your Bibles with me to Judges 4, 1 through 15. And I'll just read out of the New King James today, and it says, "When Ehud was dead, the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, who dwelt in Harosheth and Hagoyim. And the children of Israel cried out to the Lord, for Jabin had 900 chariots of iron, and for 20 years he had harshly oppressed the children of Israel. Now Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at the time. And she would sit under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel, in the mountains of Ephraim. And the children of Israel came up for her for judgment. Then she went and called for Barak, the son of Abinoam, and from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, Has not the Lord God of Israel commanded, Go and deploy troops at Mount Tabor, take with you 10,000 men, the sons of Naphtali and the sons of Zebulun, and against you I will deploy Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his multitude at the river Kishon, and I will deliver him into your hand." Verse 8, "And Barak said to her, If you will go with me, then I will go, but if you will not go with me, I will not go." So here Barak is given the promise of the Lord, but he refuses to go unless Deborah goes with him. Judges 4. Judges chapter 4, verse 8 right now. And we're moving on to verse 9. "So she said, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, there will be no glory for you in the journey you are taking, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hands of a woman. Then Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. And Barak called Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh, and went up with 10,000 men under his command. And Deborah went up with him. Now Heber, the Kenite of the children of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, had separated himself from the Kenites and pitched his tent near Terebinth tree at Zenaim, which is beside Kadesh. And they, being Heber and his people, reported to Sisera that Barak, the son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor. So Sisera gathered together all his chariots, 900 chariots of iron, and all the people who were there with him, from Harosheth to Hagoyim to the river Kishon. And Deborah said to Barak, Up, for this is the day which the Lord has delivered Sisera into your hand. Has not the Lord gone out before you? So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him." We read a few verses, and now I'm going to clarify the characters in this story. So you have different groups. You have the people of Baal. Baal is the god of the Canaanites. These people have been defeated previously in Judges, supposedly totally annihilated, but as we find out here, the story is not quite true. And Israel allowed a few of them to prosper, and they lived side by side, and eventually the people of Baal corrupted the people of God. And there maybe wasn't much of a difference between them, because it says in Judges 5 that they were worshiping other gods. And followers of Baal is King Jabin, who's the king of Canaan. And when they look at Jabin here, they believe that he was kind of a king of kind of a united nations in the Canaanite region. So he was the top dog of multiple different cities in little kingdoms in the area. And Sisera, who may have also been a king of a smaller group, was Jabin's chief of the army. He was the top general. And it says here that he had 900 iron chariots. Now, if you think about the people of Israel, what did we read in Judges 5? If you looked at 40,000 men, the fighting men of Israel, you couldn't find a sword or a spear or even a shield. So here you have 900 chariots. They easily oppressed the people of Israel for over 20 years. And as we read in 5, there was no commerce going on the highways. Nobody was trading. If you look later on in the story of Gideon, what would they do? They would sneak out at night and be threshing when people weren't looking because there was nothing. There was no order. There was no law. You hear of anarchists. You could say it was anarchy in Israel. All the cities were divided. All the people were divided, and they were all hiding like rats in holes. You can think of, I've read a couple books on Afghanistan, rural Afghanistan, and that's how it is, you know. They're hiding. The Taliban comes in, everyone hides. The Americans come in, everybody hides. They can't trust anybody. They're an occupied people. And that's how Israel was at that time, just hiding in fear, cowering. On the other side, we talked a little bit about God's people. And the characters of this story are Deborah and Barak. Now, Deborah is described as a woman. And in fact, here when we read in chapter 4, verse 4, she would sit under the palm tree of Deborah. It's funny because in the original Hebrew, that actually said she would sit beneath the palm tree of Deborah, and she was a woman. It like reaffirmed it. This was like a big deal. Deborah, a judge. And by the way, did I not mention she was a woman? So this is a big deal, especially in Scripture. Her name means bee, which is interesting. What have we read previously about how the Lord would send a bee before you to drive out the inhabitants of the land? I did not really see a connection with that, but it is still a strange name. And she is the wife of Lapidoth. We'll talk a little bit more about that. There's some interesting things here. Barak, his name means lightning. He flashes, not just lightning, but flashes of lightning. It's ironic because in the story, Barak is anything but a flash of lightning. He is a slow, meandering, reluctant leader. He challenges his election by God to do great things. God says go, and he says, I don't want to go. He's portrayed comically. He leads 10,000 men to fight the Lord. And in the end, we're going to read, instead of chasing people he should be chasing, he chases empty chariots. So, in the way the writer of Judges depicted Barak, he was kind of a fool. And I found these from a couple different comments from SDA Bible commentary and also Eerdman's commentary on Judges 4, if you'd like to reference. Now, it gets even more interesting. There are some people who believe that Deborah was married to Barak. Very interesting. They say that the joining of Lapidoth means burning torches, and Barak means flashes of lightning. And they think that Barak may have actually been Lapidoth. Not everyone believes this, but some do. So not only do you have gender reversal, but if this is even true, you have Deborah ruling and judging over the nations and telling her husband what to do, and he's unwilling to do such. I won't say that this is the right way, but there is a group of people who feel that. So instead of Barak living up to his name of flashes of lightning, he's really living up to his name of a meandering, slow line of burning torches. More interesting irony. Remember Heber, and we will talk about Jael soon. If you look in Judges 4:11, it talks about Heber the Kenite. Now this is really interesting. I've heard this story so many times, I've read it, and I never get it because I never really look. So Heber is a descendant of Jethro, the father of Moses. And these people lived near the Israelites. They were not Israelites, but Jethro had raised his people. You know that he joined Moses on the way from into the land of Canaan. And they were supposed to be loyal to the Israelites. But what does Heber do? His name means ally. That's his real name. It means ally. And he makes an alliance with Jabin, the king of the Canaanites. So he's a traitor to the people of Israel. A son from the lineage of Moses, a brother-in-law of Moses, or a father of Moses, and he's actually a traitor to the people of God. He is the one who tips off Jabin and Sisera and says, hey, by the way, Barak is building an army on Mount Tabor. You need to go defeat that before it becomes a big problem. Additionally, he's the husband to Jael, which we're going to learn. Jael is married to Heber. She's among the people of Jethro. And her name means the Lord is God. There's a lot of beliefs that the names that we see in the Bible are not just the real names of these people, but these names have a meaning to the characters these people lived. They may not have actually been named this. So Jael, her name means Lord is God. She's the wife of Heber, and she neutralizes her husband's alliances. She is the one who ends up killing Sisera. So it's a very interesting story, and I hope you all enjoy it as we go through it. And in the end, we're also going to see who the real superhero is and how this ties into our life today. One final thing. All through the book of Judges, you have a war between two gods. Who is the best storm god? Baal was considered the god of fertility in the storm. And Yahweh, the Israeli God, or the God of the people of Israel, in this book, he's always controlling the storm. It also is in the story of Gideon. Gideon breaks down this idol of Baal, and then Gideon is also looking for signs from the storm god. Will the wool be dry or will it be wet when the mist comes down? So there's a lot all through this book. It's pretty amazing. But today we're concentrating on this little area right here in the red spot, and that's where Deborah lived. We're going to move on to the war that was to occur. If we read in Signs of the Time, June 16, 1881, Ellen White paints a very interesting picture about the state of the Israelites. They were but poorly prepared for an encounter, and looked with terror upon the vast enemies spread out in the plain. Beneath them, equipped with the implements of warfare, provided with dreaded chariots of iron. These were constructed as to be terribly destructive. Like large scythe-like knives were fastened to the axles, so that the chariots, being driven through the ranks of the enemy, would cut them down like wheat before the sickle. So the people of God at that time, they would be living up in the mountains, in the holes in the caves, but down in the plains, the Canaanites ruled. Because can you imagine, in this day and age, you have tanks versus a couple Taliban. There's no hope. You'll just get run over. And this was the same story here. They're hiding up in the mountains, hiding in their holes, threshing wheat secretly, afraid of down in the plains where this battle is to occur, the 900 large chariots owned by King Jabin. And we'll read a little bit further. Judges 4:15 says, "And the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and all his army with the edge of the sword before Barak. And Sisera alighted from his chariot and fled away on foot." It doesn't end there. In verses 5, which is one of the oldest known, you could say, poetry in Hebrew, it talks about the victory that the Lord did. So if we go to Judges 4 and 5, it says, "Lord, you went out from Seir. When you marched down from the field of Edom, the earth trembled, the heavens poured, the clouds also poured water, the mountains gushed before the Lord. This Sinai before the Lord, God of Israel." So you see, speaking of a storm, rain, floods. You go to Judges 5:19 through 21, just a couple verses down. Again, talking of the same battle, or what happened. It says, the kings came and fought. Then the kings of Canaan fought in Tanakh by the waters of Megiddo. They took no spoils of silver. They fought from the heavens. The stars from their courses fought against Sisera. The torrents of Kishon swept them away, the ancient torrent of Kishon. So really what happens this day? Barak does nothing. The Lord just sweeps him away in a mighty flood, a mighty storm. And that's what's described in this chapter. Now, SDA Bible commentary has very interesting things to say about this plain and about the torrent of Kishon, and it's very interesting. They say, under such rain, the clay and soil of this plain where the battle took place would turn into a quagmire and sticky mud, which the chariots of the Canaanites would be suddenly unable to maneuver. An excavator working on the excavation of the city of Megiddo, which is near this site, tells how on rainy days it was virtually impossible to go anywhere, even on horseback, because of the mud. Interestingly enough, April 1799, the Turkish army had a battle on this very plain, and great numbers of their troops were swept away by a flash flood. In World War I, the English troops found that even a quarter hour of rain would make cavalry maneuvers impossible. So that's what happened. The strength of the army of Jabin and Sisera was suddenly turned to nothing. The waters came, washed the majority of them away, and the victory was the Lord's. Judges 5, 16 and 17. Excuse me, that was Judges 4. That's a typo. Judges 4, 16 and 17. After the Lord wipes out the armies of Jabin, it says, "But Barak pursued the chariots and the army as far as Harosheth and Hagoyim. And the army of Sisera fled by the edge of the sword. Not a man was left. However, Sisera had fled away on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber." We talked about her. Heber, the ally of Jabin and the ally of Sisera. So this is his wife. Heber the Kenite, for there was peace between Jabin, the king of Hazor, and the house of Heber the Kenite. So what does Barak do? It says in Judges 16, he chases chariots. He also dispatches the remnants of the army. He takes care of them that got washed away, those who are downstream somewhere, finishes off all of the Canaanite army. But somehow he can't quite, he's too slow. Slow torches, not a flash of lightning. He's too slow to catch up with Sisera. So Sisera disappears and goes to his ally, to Heber. Now, Sisera in verses 17 through 22 comes upon the tents. We'll start at 18. "And Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, 'Turn aside, my lord, turn aside, to me do not fear.' And when he had turned aside with her into the tent, she covered him with a blanket. Then he said to her, 'Please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty.' So she opened a jug of milk and gave him to drink and covered him. And he said to her, 'Stand at the door of the tent, and if any man comes and inquires of you and says, "Is there any man here?" you shall say, "No."'" Now what's very significant about these verses is there was a very ancient, well-known, common thing among the Bedouins or the tent people who lived in that time, that if anyone ate in your house or your tent, they would have your protection. So that's why Sisera, who's a commander of an army, he knows that these people are his allies, but he still says, "Can I have something to drink?" He's asking her assurance for protection. Because this was like the 10 Commandments for these people. You didn't break this. If you ate in somebody's house, even if you were their mortal enemy, if they fed you in their tent, you knew that that enemy would not kill you that night. So he even double checks, "Can you give me something to eat?" as an insurance, because he knows with this type of people, this type of law is never violated. And he said to her, "Stand at the door of the tent, and if any man comes and inquires of you and says, 'Is there any man here?' you shall say, 'No.'" Then Jael, Heber's wife, the wife of the ally, took a tent peg, and took a hammer in her hand, and went softly to him, and drove the peg into his temple, and it went down into the ground, for he was fast asleep and weary, and so he died. Go to chapter 5, verse 25 and 30. It even describes it a little bit more in the poem. He asked for water, she gave him milk. She brought out cream in a lordly bowl. She stretched out her hand to the tent peg, and her right hand to the workman's hammer. She pounded Sisera, she pierced his head, she split and struck his temple. At her feet he sank and fell. He fell, he lay, still at her feet. He sank and fell. Where he sank, he fell, and there he lay dead. The greatest warrior in that time, defeated by a woman. Now there's a lot of irony in this defeat. Especially the Jewish eyes would have caught this. Maybe not so much today. But if you go on just a little bit further, it talks about the sad realities of war in that time. Because the mother of Sisera, in this poem, what is she doing? She's looking through the window and crying through the lattice. Why is the chariot so long coming? Why tarries the clatter of chariots? Her wisest ladies answer her, and yes, she answered herself. Are not they finding and dividing the spoil? To every man a girl or two? For Sisera, plunder of dyed garments, plunder of garments embroidered and dyed, 2 pieces of dyed embroidery for the neck of the looter? The Bible kind of tones this down in our English language. Instead of for each man a woman, a lady, or a damsel or 2, as it says in the King James, is really for each man a womb or 2. It's talking about rape. So the irony here is that the predator, the rapist, dies at the hand of a potential victim. Those who are the strong are suddenly made weak. Interesting story. The women are the heroes, the men are the losers, the strong are made weak, the weak are made strong. But in here, I think there's a very foreboding warning for us. Because Jael, whose name means the Lord is God, plays a very important role, and she is part of a very important statement by the angel of the Lord. And the people of God also have an important role, and they are part of a curse by the angel of the Lord. So a very foreboding warning for us. Judges 5, verses 24. Most blessed of women be Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, of the tent-dwelling women, most blessed. Jael, who broke one of the oldest laws, one of their, you could say, 10 commandments, by betraying somebody. I mean, you got to admit it. Well, she did God's work in saving the people of God from one of their greatest enemies. It's dirty. It's really dirty. But yet she is blessed. She's contrasted in verse 23. Curse Meroz, said the angel of the Lord. Curse its inhabitants bitterly, because they did not come to help the Lord against the mighty. Who is Meroz? Meroz was a small group of Israelites living just downstream from where the battle happened. So they saw everything happen before their eyes. They saw the Lord sweep everybody away from the torrents of Kishon. And when Barak goes hunting, chasing, killing the enemy, they just sit there and watch. And it's a very important thing for us because these are the people of God. And Jael is a pagan. But Jael does the work of God and is blessed. And the people of God have inaction and they are cursed. Nowhere else in the book of Judges is there a curse put on the people of God like here. The Israelite inhabitants of Meroz on the path of the retreating hosts of Sisera refused to render assistance in any form. With the aid of these men, the pursuing Israelites could have probably prevented any of the Canaanites, perhaps even Sisera, from escaping from the battle. Because of their refusal to help, the angel of the Lord pronounced a curse on them. their curse was not a sin of commission, but a sin of omission. Their transgression in this instance was that they did nothing in the hour of need, and for this the curse of God fell upon them. No other verse in the book of Judges constitutes so severe a warning to the members of the church today as the one that here curses those who refuse to help in a time of crisis. In the face of a crying need for laborers, many professed Christians are content to follow their leisurely, selfish course, refusing to render any assistance to the church of God as it stands in battle with Satan. They say that the work of the church is to be performed by the ministers and accept no responsibility for themselves. The curse of Meroz rests upon the unfaithful Christians unless they turn from their listless non-cooperation. SDA Bible Commentary, Volume 2 on Judges. My question for us today, while the story of women heroes is amazing, we're close to Mother's Day and all mothers are heroes for us, I would like us to focus on the curse of Meroz because we believe we are the people of God. And I think in many ways we are like the people of God in Canaan at that time. If you read at your leisure this afternoon, Judges 5, I skipped a lot of it, Deborah, in her poem, goes through all the tribes that could have helped, but did not. And she mocks them. And then at the very end, the angel of the Lord then curses the people of Meroz, which had the greatest opportunity to help the Lord in his cause. So how are we? The Lord can do great things, and are we watching off from a distance? But I don't really approve of how this is done. And maybe if it was my idea, then maybe I would support. I don't appreciate this leader of the church, and since I don't like him, I won't support this church in any way. Are we like the people of Meroz? Ellen White, in letter 30 from 1888, this is found in the devotional That I May Know Him under November 22nd. Ellen White says, "When the car drags heavily, then is the time for everyone to push, put the shoulders to the wheel, and not stand back giving orders or accusing the ones who are trying to push the load or criticizing everything they do, because it is not done in their way and after their ideas. Let everyone do his level best to move the load with might and strength." So in the end, we are but a small people, are we not? We are but a broken up people. You think there are so many churches bigger than us. So many churches. But so were the people of God in that time. And I think Judges 4 and 5 can prove a great lesson to us. That even though, I forgot to mention Jabin, whose name means a man of discernment, meaning he was wise, the king of the Canaanites, he was wise. He knew his position. He knew he could win. Even though all the wisdom of the world, all the discernment of the world, may look at us and think that we are not much, or even the wisdom and discernment of the devil and of the sinful people around us, these people can misread, and even we can misread the position of power with the Lord on our side. Additionally, are we making alliances with the enemy, like Heber, whose father was an ally of Moses and the people of Israel? And you see how the Lord turned that around. He makes an ally with Jabin to betray Israel, and his wife, his very own wife, neutralizes that with a spike and a hammer. Are we named after lightning, but we're really a slow-burning torch, reluctant to help the cause of God? Are we like the timid men in this story, or will we be like the brave women, meaning Deborah, or even the heathen Jael? Also very interesting how the world-class fighter and sexual predator dies at the hand of a likely victim because of the power of God. In the very end here, though, I want us to think about the curse of Meroz, because I think that is the biggest part. It's just a couple verses. Verse 23 and 24 in those that we read in the two chapters. This whole story puts it all into perspective of how the people of God refused to do their part despite the fact that he had things that he wanted them to do. And even though he put the odds overwhelmingly on their side, they refused to do that, and they received a curse. So we're living in the last times, the end times. My prayer for each and every one of us today is, are we the people of Meroz? Or are we the people, we may be on the heathen side of Jael, who will do her part because she believes that according to her name the Lord is God, or like Deborah, or maybe even be like reluctant Barak, but go along. He still had a blessing. Or will we be like the people of Meroz, who in the end receive a curse? So this is my wish and prayer for us all. Finally, in Luke 19:40, this is a famous verse for us because we're supposed to be having the loud cry, the third angel's message. That is what the people of Meroz were supposed to be doing, fighting in the Lord's battle. But if we are not willing to be a part of that group, the stones, there's always somebody else to cry out. There's always the pagans. There's always the Jaels that are not even part of the people of God that are ready to step into our place. There is always a new grafted branch that can be placed in the place where we now grow. So my wish and prayer for us all is that we do not remain silent so that the stones do not have to cry out. Thank you.